Hello, BookTube. I mentioned in another video today that I watch a lot of BookTube, and a lot of videos that I watch raise subjects that I want to respond to. And I'm never sure how to do that. I'm never sure whether or not it would be welcome on the part of the BookTuber, especially if the BookTuber is new to me. I have a mixed reputation on BookTube, and people who've never watched my channel have very firm opinions about what kind of a monster I am, as opposed to those of you who have watched my channel and know exactly what kind of monster I am. And so I'm always hesitant when I watch those videos to leave a response, unless it's a video by a friend, in which case I don't have any trouble at all. And I watched one of those videos just recently from Hannah at Hannah's Books. She did a video on the ethics of ARCs, that's advanced reading copies, advanced review copies. Do I have one nearby? Yes, this thing here. The advanced review copy of a book, the bite of the apple isn't going to look like this, it's going to look like that. But you get an advanced copy from the publisher for the purposes of review, or potential review. And Hannah has done some reviewing, on BookTube, and amassed a very loyal and loving audience, and also started to do book reviewing elsewhere. Started to do book reviewing online, including for the online literary journal where I am one of the editors, Open Letters Review, but also elsewhere, also in print elsewhere, and I believe that will continue. I believe that's a process that will climb. And this has led her into the possession of not only print galleys, but also electronic galleys of books. And it's led her, brainy sort that she is, into questioning what the ethics are here. What is incumbent on me and not incumbent on me to do. And she mentions in her video, I'll leave a link to her video down below. If you don't subscribe to her channel, you really should. She mentions in her video that she imagines that the situation is probably different for professional book reviewers, people who get tons of books in the mail, not just the one or two that they ask for, but lots. And those of you who've been watching this channel for a while will know that I am a professional book reviewer, and you will remember pre-pandemic days that I used to get literally big plastic mailing tubs full of books every day from publishers when I requested barely none of them. They came from publishers just as a matter of course, because I've been reviewing books for a long time for a lot of venues. And I think that was probably a nod in my direction by Hannah, that probably for a professional reviewer this is a little bit different. But there's still lots of aspects of this that I want to weigh in on, because she was wondering, if I request a book, what are my obligations to review it? And if I have an obligation to review it, well, then what kind of an obligation do I have in terms of the tone of my review? She mentions that when she hit her year anniversary on BookTube, her inbox started to be flooded with offers for review, including non-book items, things that have nothing to do with books or only tangentially related to books, one of which was, coincidentally enough, a clip-on plastic reading light. I've been looking for one of those myself, oddly enough, because this little book room, this iteration of this little book room, has apparently no wall sockets. There are wall sockets. There's a big bank of them, like 6 in a row, and a big black panel on the wall. But none of them appear to work. They don't appear to conduct electricity. I haven't had my surly houseboy look at the circuit breakers, is it called, or the switches, or the fuses, or whatever it is. I haven't had him actually go through and check. I'm going to want to do that, because I'm probably going to want a window fan in this room in the height of summer. Maybe not. The idea of it being warm enough to need a window fan is just, it's mouth-watering. But one way or another, I don't have a source of electricity in this room, except for the ceiling light. The ceiling light works, which leads me to believe that it must just be something wrong with the sockets, because the circuit in that wall must work. One way or another, I don't have a source of light when it's dark in this room, and I thought, you know, a clip-on book light, if it's strong enough, would be pretty good. The problem with most book lights is that they are so weak they only illuminate the page. And I've met a lot of people over the years who think that makes a good book light, when actually that's really bad. The quality of a book light is not how much light is hitting the page, it's how much light is hitting your eyes. If your eyes aren't getting lots of light, you are incurring eye strain. And the one that Hannah was contacted about, I don't know why these people don't contact me, but they don't. I've never had any of these contacts in my email, but at least unless they're being strained out by Gmail. But the one that contacted her was one that had attracted me on a search, which is a plastic light that is charged on your computer. It doesn't need an electric plug at all. It's very bright. It's very sturdy plastic, and it has a USB cord. So you just plug it into your computer while you're working during the day, and then it runs all night. Very tempting. Very, very, very tempting. But she mentioned the conflict that she had because they contacted her and wanted her to review the thing. Take one of these lights in exchange for an honest review. That sort of thing. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that. And she was also mentioning the ethics of NetGalley, which is an online site that publishers go to. They offer free e-copies of their forthcoming books with descriptions and cover art and all. You make a profile and sign up and hope for the best. You hope that NetGalley will approve you in some way or other. People go into NetGalley with a lot of unrealistic expectations. They think, well, why am I being turned down here when they have never reviewed a book in any way, not even in conversation with friends? The publishers who do this are going to want some return on the investment of putting their wares out on this site. And if you have no profile as a reviewer whatsoever, they might not agree to send you books, even though it's free for them to do. But if you do have some sort of profile, you can usually get a selection of e-copies in advance from publishers, including major publishers. I have a NetGalley profile. I use it all the time. What NetGalley wants in return, not the publishers, although the publishers want this too, but what NetGalley really wants in return is that you review the books on NetGalley, on the site. They would like you to have your review percentage of the books you've requested and received up there in the 80s. I don't know what mine is. I think it's around 10%. My review percentage is terrible because every time I get one of the NetGalley titles and send it straight to my Kindle, I just automatically think of where I'm going to review it. And it's never going to be NetGalley. It's going to be someplace with a much bigger audience. And I think that's probably why I continue to get books approved, even though I don't play by the rules. But the thing about the rule is, as Hannah mentions in her video, it's part of a sort of reciprocal arrangement, which means that I might have accidentally stumbled onto the ethical way to do this. Because the point that I want to make about all of this has to do with intermediation. Forever and ever, for 200 years, book publishers would want very much publicity. They had their own publicity arm, people that they paid to do that. But they also wanted more than that. They wanted a conversation to start. They wanted book reviewers to notice their books and review them. And let's say 100 years ago, the only way that was possible was through the intermediation of a journal of some kind, a larger organization of some kind. What publishers would do would be, like W.W. Norton would have 4 new books. They would package up those new books and send them to the New Yorker, or Saturday Evening Post, or the Washington Post, or the Wall Street Journal. They would just make sure they had those copies in the newsroom. And each book had a little bit of publicity material with it so that the book's editor, who was opening those things and looking at them, knew what they were looking at. But it didn't go anywhere beyond that at all. The understanding was, from the publisher, was that the book section editor would get those books and make decisions of which ones they thought their readers would be interested in and which ones they had reviewers to review competently. And then they would take those books and send them to the reviewers for review. It was almost never the case that the book reviewer reviewed the book himself. Instead, it was that they sent them to book reviewers. In the early days of that craft, the book reviewer was only paid with the book. They didn't get any money for their job. They got the book. They got to keep the book and, by extension, resell the book. Sometimes, if they didn't get to keep the book, like, for instance, in the early years, the TLS, the London Times Literary Supplement, would expect you to send the book back, but they would also pay you. But in any case, no matter what happened to the reviewer's end, the reviewer submitted their review not to the publisher, but to their editor. There was a huge organ, intermediary, between the publisher and the reviewer. So what the publisher wasn't paying the book section editor anything. They were sending them books in the hopes that of a whole series of factors beyond their control would give those books an extra boost in sales. It was a gamble that the publishing industry was willing to take. The publicist for a new book was willing to say, all right, this is a gamble. I don't know that the New York Times will review this book. I can't make them review it. But if they review it, it's a huge return on investment. It's 2 cents for me to mail this to them, and it could result in 2,000 extra sales. It's a huge return on investment if they do. But they have to do it on their own. It's their decision whether or not to do it. And likewise, in the best possible cases, the editor would then turn to the reviewer and say, I'm sending you this thing. You've done you did a review for me a year ago on a roughly connected subject. I kind of liked it. I think you're reliable. I'm sending you this new book. See what you can make of it. And if I want it reviewed, send me a review by such and such a date for $50, $150, $450, whatever it is. And you see what I mean? When that happens, the ethics are taken right out of the equation. The publisher is just gambling. They aren't asking for anything. The book section editor is estimating based on their own tastes and on their knowledge of their readership. And the reviewer is taking what they can get. The problem comes in when the intermediaries start to thin, start to get incentives from the publisher, or disappear entirely. Once the intermediaries are gone, then we run into problems. Then we run into problems. Like, for instance, in the example in Hannah's video, it was, let's say, the publisher of that book light that contacted the reviewer directly. And they didn't just say, can we send you this light? From what I gather from Hannah's video, they said, we'd like to send you this light in exchange for an honest review that includes showing the light and talking about it on your channel. And that is bad. That is where the problem is. That's where no wonder it left a bad taste in her mouth. That's where the unethical part comes in for the reviewer. That's where the unethical part comes in, because if you do that, you hurt the one thing you have going for you, which is your independent judgment. Because let's say the publisher, let's use the example of a publisher. Publisher, even without the intermediaries, like if you request a book from a publisher directly and they send it to you directly, they can hope for a review, but that's it. They can't touch content. They can't touch the content of the review. And if they try to, your answer should be, as I've said on this channel many times about sponsorships, your answer should be an immediate and firm no. If someone if they want to affect the internals of your review in any way, your answer should be no. And that's not just from publishers, or in this case, booklight suppliers. When that booklight supplier said, we'd like you to show this in your video, Hannah should have said to she's new to this, as she says in her video, but the proper response there is to say, what I do in my videos is my own business. Do you still want to send me the light? You send me the light, and that is the end of your end of this whole thing. You send it to me, and that's it. No strings, no conditions, no expectations, no follow-ups, no specifications, no nothing. I get it, and if I want to review it, I will. If I don't, I won't. And if I want to review it, the review will take any form I want. It won't have anything to do with what you want, no specifications whatsoever. Do you still want to send it to me? Now, they would probably have said no. And you wouldn't be that firm with a publisher, of course, because we're all nice readers here. But nevertheless, whether it's a publisher dealing with you directly and saying, could you put up your review on this date because this is the book's release date? I've had publishers do that to me. Say, don't run your review on this date, not before and not after, because this is the date the books come out. And I have to, in the rare instances where that has happened, I've had to say, well, okay, no thanks. I don't want the book, and I don't want anything else from you. Whether it's that, or whether it's that whole exchange for an honest review is meant to be a 3-card Monty. When a publisher says that to a reviewer, the word honest is meant to get your attention. It's meant to distract you from the fact that baked into that proposition is that you will review it. And that is unacceptable. The 3-card Monty is that you're supposed to be paying attention to honest. Oh, well, okay, so I can be fair, I can be critical, when really it's the review part. They're sending it to you so that you will review it. You are required to talk about it. You not have the freedom to make up your mind that this isn't worth anybody's time to talk about. And that's bad. Anytime, when we're talking about intermediation, anytime, whether it's a publisher or an editor, if an editor sends you a book and says, here's a book, I'd like to review by such and such a date, and if you could go easy on it because the author's a friend of the publication, friend of the newspaper, no matter how badly you want to break into the industry, no matter how bad you want that, your immediate answer should be, I'm going to review it the way I want. Do you still want my review, or should I send it back to you? I'm not going to go easy on it unless I like it. I'm not going to go easy on it because you tell me to. You're buying a review from me. You're not buying the contents of the review. that should be the response. But regardless of which of those things it is, no matter where you fall on the intermediary scale, the important thing is to remember here is that you are selling, commissioning a review, not the contents of a review. If the offer of here's something that you, Hannah calls it a gift. If the offer comes to you, here's something that you don't have to pay for that you might otherwise have paid for, and in response, we want a review, your answer should be no. If the offer is, here's the thing that you might otherwise have paid for, you can have it for free, and in response, we want a positive review, and we want you to do this, this, and this in the review, your answer should be a resounding no. The only situation in which that is permissible, no matter who your intermediary is, and no matter whether or not you have one, is, here is this item. If you feel like reviewing it, we would love that. And that's it. No more follow-up. Not a week later saying, hey, wondering if you feel like reviewing them. No. Nothing like that. Every once in a while, I have a new publicist try that sort of crap with me. They'll send me a book, and then a week later, they'll say, just wondering how you're coming along. Occasionally, I have to send a quick email saying I don't give progress reports. I expect not to hear from you again. But that is the key, and that was at the heart of my ranting about sponsorships. If someone gives you something and says, if you feel like reviewing this, go right ahead. It would be great because we know your audience and we know we'd like them as customers. That's fine. If somebody gives you something and says, here's what we want you to say about it. Here, we want you to review this. That is part of your contract. You can't just be silent. And here's what we want you to say about it or do about it. Then your answer should be no. The firewall has to be you. Used to be that wasn't the case. Used to be that your intermediaries were the firewall. No one in a million years would send, no major publisher in a million years would send a book to the Wall Street Journal, to the books editor of the Wall Street Journal, and lay out conditions. Not in a million years. For the very simple reason that not only would they not get a review for that book, but the book section editor would remember that. And it'd be uphill going for you to get a review there ever again on any of your books. It was just understood. For 100 years, it was just understood that you didn't do that you absolutely didn't do that. It's only with the proliferation of things like NetGalley or Goodreads or places where the producer of whatever it is, in this case it's books, feels like they have some sort of coercive power over the reviewer. It's only in circumstances like that that the ethics come into play. Hannah mentions in her video that she has the sinking feeling that if she gets 4 or 5 books from the same publisher and doesn't review any of them, she won't get any more books from that publisher. And that might be true because there'd be human spite involved. And that is one of the things that's removed when you had an intermediary. Because the publisher is not keeping track of whether or not the Minneapolis Star ever reviews their books. They're just taking the chance. It's worth taking the chance. None of that redounds on the reviewer at all. Whereas if it's person to person, the publisher and you, then maybe the publicist involved would say, yeah, you're not reviewing anything that I send you, so no thanks. Which is why it's often, I know this is going to sound awful traditional and stuff, maybe, but that's why it's often a good idea to try to affiliate yourself at first with an intermediary of some kind or other to spare yourself the trouble. The intermediary could be Open Letters Review or other online sites like Open Letters Review. It could be your local newspaper. I've mentioned many times on this channel, if you want to do this, if your local newspaper runs original content, give them a try. That way you have them as a buffer. That way you're not dealing directly with the person who wants the review and has the power to cut off your supply or whatever, like a spigot. Of course, you should temper your expectations when you do that. I've had many people try that without tempering their expectations. Unless you have a massive nuclear reactor amount of natural talent, you're not going to be any good at book reviewing or anything else until you practice quite a bit. So having never written a book review of any kind before in any way whatsoever, even for school, if you approach, the Tampa Sentinel or whatever and say, I'd like to review a book for you, they might say no. They might go with someone who has a clip sheet that proves that they can do the work and do it well and do it on time. There's nothing wrong with that at all. You are not guaranteed equal outcome. Okay, you have plenty of opportunities. There are plenty of online sites, for instance, that will allow you to build a nice, what we used to call a string file of published reviews. Open Letters Review is one of them, but there are plenty of others. So practice might be incumbent on you to do, but if you've got the practice, once you've got the practice, my advice would be try to find a venue, try to find an intermediary so that you're not involved in these ethical questions at all. That also makes it a little dicey to think about a thing like NetGalley, because you are helping them in it, what Hannah is right to call a very capitalistic exchange. You are helping them quite a bit if you leave reviews on their site, where effectively no one's going to see the reviews except them. It's the same thing with leaving reviews on any of these predatory public sites, or sites that are benevolent on their front-facing surface, but that are owned by predatory sites, like Goodreads is owned by Amazon. It's the same thing with all of them. When you do something like that, you have to be a little bit wary of it. In my own case, I have a readership, an established readership. I review widely and in a lot of different places. So it's probably in NetGalley's best interest to just let me review these things elsewhere, instead of really wondering why you're not generating content on our site, especially since generating content for free on a site with lots of eyeballs on it feels just wrong. It just feels wrong. But one way or another, Hannah is right in her video to imply that this is a question that is going to affect a lot of people connected with BookTube, both now and in the immediate future. Because if you have 2,000 subscribers on your channel, 1,000 subscribers on your channel, people who've taken recommendations from you on your channel, then you are a book influencer. Keep in mind how small the book world is. It's tiny. There's hardly anybody in the world who likes to read. If you can command the attention, the buying power even, of people who watch your channel, then that is a platform. And it might mean that you are approached, with books. If that's the case, I would like to just leave you with this video in your mind, which is that the proper line in the sand to draw is between someone requesting a video, or someone hoping for a review is fine. Someone expecting a review, demanding one, or reaching right into the review to demand parts of it be X, Y, and Z is not fine. It is not fine. You might think, if you're just new to this, you might think, well, I'll put up with a little of that until I have enough clout not to. But you can't do that. You can't do that without losing it. It's bad for you. It's bad for your moral fiber. It's bad to do that. Because once you start to prove yourself as someone who will dance to any tune for money, who would take you seriously as a critic or as an assessor of anything? Who would do that? Better by far to guard your good name for the future, for your future use of it, than to sell it right away just because it's neat to get free things. So that, just to have this video in mind, not so much addressing solely Hannah's video as addressing all the rest of you who might be encountering these problems. Stick to your integrity. If you don't have an interface, an intermediary, you should get yourself an intermediary if you can. It's an uphill battle, but it's possible to do. And that would solve the problem. But if you don't have one, if you're just dealing with these people directly, with publishers directly, you have to stick to your integrity. If a publisher says, I have a book, it seems like it's of interest to you, I'd love to send it to you, fine. Then fine. Yes, without any guilty conscience. Without any guilty conscience. That publicist, the person who's making that decision to send that book, is weighing the variables in the balance and easily deciding that this is worth the risk. That's fine. As I've mentioned many times before in screeds about sponsorships, anything more than that, anything to the north of that is not fine. You must immediately reject anything north of that. In exchange for an honest review is, take out the word honest. It means in exchange for a review. You have to review this. No. 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 No conditions. If you want to send it to me, that's fine. I'll consider it for review. But nothing more than that. Nothing more than that. And certainly not reaching into the review, whether it's an editor in a print journal or whether it's somebody on writing your email for your YouTube channel. Reaching into the review and saying, we want you to do this, this, and this. Just say no. Your answer should be no. Don't try to mediate it. Just say no. If you want to send me something for consideration, that's fine. I'll consider it. No strings attached, no follow-ups, no nothing. Anything more than that, no, I'm not your person. So there you go. That's my response to the ethics of ARCs. They are perfectly ethical, provided they're in that first camp. A gamble on the part of a publicist to spread the word about a book. in the case of someone like Hannah, you know perfectly well that gamble is worth it. That gamble is very much worth it. It's unlikely to me that publicists really know much about our little corner of BookTube, but you know a lot of our corner of BookTube, and you know perfectly well if Hannah were to hold up a new book and say, boy, oh boy, this really impressed me, and then go into her hyper-intellectual, her incredibly nuanced understanding of why it's good, you know perfectly well how fast that book would end up on your TBR. Pretty fast. She is a trusted voice. If I have my druthers, she's going to be trusted all over the country in mainstream publications in not too little time. But one way or another, that's only valuable if you know that that is sacrosanct. Right? If you get the suspicion, even the slightest suspicion will do enough to kill it. If you get the suspicion that that can be bought, then the game is over. So better not to do it. So more and more book publishers, I feel certain, will come to realize that. But in the meantime, that is my response to the ethics of ARCs. They are perfectly ethical if they are cast into the wind. If the publisher is casting them at you, here you go. Like those tubs of books that I used to get, those publishers weren't expecting reviews from me. They were hoping. That's all. Perfectly free to hope. A lot of them got reviews, but that's it. That's the farthest extent of it. It can't be anything more than that. Or it costs you the one thing that makes your review worthwhile. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the matter. I would be willing to bet that I have dealt with more ARCs than anybody on BookTube, so I thought I should weigh in. I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.